Magandang umaga, Filipinos. Good morning from Canada. I'm Thomas I. Likeness, reporting from our Eagle News studio in the Western Canadian province of Alberta. My city is Edmonton, and we're bringing you news from around the country. I just brewed my fresh coffee here. Just had some brewed. Do you need one? I'll have my producer get it for you. Hope your morning is going well. What have you got planned for today? Maybe a lot of work around the house. I know I've got a few chores to take care of here as well. Hope you can fit it all into your schedule today. Let's take a look at the weather around the country. Our street today comes from Toronto. There today. Hope she stayed dry. Temperatures in Toronto got up to about the 12-degree mark, and that's the story for most of the rest of the country. They had partly sunny skies, but again, temperatures in the low teens. Quebec had temps of around 6 degrees. It got up to 13 degrees. We got over to the east coast, the Atlantic provinces. They were cooler. St. John's, Newfoundland, right around the freezing mark. It was the coldest. Zero with rain. And that's bad when it rains around zero because it turns to ice as soon as it hits the ground. Elsewhere, temperatures ranged from 2 to 8 degrees. Well, across North America, springtime has finally arrived. The temperatures are warm. In Florida, they've reopened the beaches, and many Americans elsewhere are calling for the easing of restrictions. But what about in my country? Well, in Canada, that's not going to happen for a while. You see, we're a cautious country. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he'll make his decisions based on what the experts tell him, not on the whims of the public.
About that easing, and again, people need to know it's not going to suddenly reopen in any part of the country overnight to what it was before. We're going to have to be very, very careful, very gradual, very progressive if we are to prevent the kind of resurgence that would send us all back into lockdown as we were before. We want to make sure that what we are doing now is not for nothing, that we manage to get through this with the kind of containment and control approaches that the proper measures will allow for.
Now, Trudeau has repeatedly said it will be weeks before the restrictions are eased. The agreement to keep the Canada-U.S. border closed to non-essential travel has been extended for another month. Prime Minister Trudeau saying it was a mutual agreement with his counterpart, U.S. President Donald Trump. Border restrictions were first put into place on March 21st. Last week, Trump suggested he wanted to see that border opened sooner than later. And at that time, Trudeau said, you can't make that decision unilaterally. Two of them got together. He says the agreement will continue to allow essential goods to cross back and forth across the border. Looking at the numbers quickly for COVID-19 in Canada, 34,000 confirmed cases since the outbreak began, just over 1,500 deaths. About 1/3 of those infected have recovered. Some changes to air travel in Canada. Beginning today, all airline passengers will have to wear masks, according to a new Transport Canada order. Now, that order requires all arriving and departing passengers to prove they have the necessary non-medical mask or some kind of a face covering during the boarding process. If they don't, they're not allowed to continue their trip. Travelers will also be asked to cover their mouth and nose at airport screening checkpoints. That's when the screeners can't get enough. They need that 2 meters of separation between themselves and the passenger. Also, when passengers cannot physically distance from others, or when directed by airline employees or public health officials. Interestingly enough, the order does not apply to people traveling by bus or rail. However, the government is advising those travelers to also wear masks or face coverings as much as possible. Some notes from elsewhere in the country. The Canadian city with the second largest Filipino population is Winnipeg. It's in the province of Manitoba, kind of in the geographic center of the country, right between Saskatchewan and Ontario. Now, one of the big events there every summer is the Manitoba Filipino Street Celebration, and It too has become a victim of the pandemic, canceled for this year. And I'm assuming a similar event that we have here in Edmonton, I enjoy going to that every year. I assume it's going to suffer the same fate. Nothing official on that yet, though. An outbreak of COVID-19 at a beef packing plant, a meat packing plant in the small town of High River, that's about a half hour south of Calgary, Alberta, has many in that town's Philippine community concerned. Now, the plant is owned by Cargill. It employs about 2,000 people. It processes nearly 4,500 head of cattle a day. Many of the workers there are originally from the Philippines. I'm told it's up around 60%. Now, the province's chief medical officer of health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, says that outbreak is significant.
Increase in case numbers can be attributed in part to a surge in cases identified in households linked to a meat packing facility in High River. There are now 358 cases linked to this outbreak involving multiple connected households. Some of these households are in surrounding communities, such as Calgary, and current information suggests that the cases in this outbreak are primarily linked to household transmission. Alberta Health Services has put together a dedicated outbreak response team to track this High River outbreak and to prevent further infections at any locations where transmission is occurring.
Now, some workers fear they unknowingly brought it home to their families. I tried to speak with people who work there. No one's returning my calls. And, you know, that's not surprising. That's really understandable because they don't want to jeopardize their employment. The conditions in these plants see workers standing side by side. It's an assembly line kind of layout, so there's no social distancing. Cargill says it is making changes. They're eliminating one shift. I'm not sure what else. They really haven't got into detail as to what they're doing in the plant, and whether those measures will have much of an effect, I don't know. But in the meantime, there's a lot of scared people in High River. Another issue of concern is what's happening in seniors' in my province of Alberta. Sadly, there was also a problem. It occurred in the tiny northern community of McLennan. The administration of a privately owned nursing home there has been taken over by the Alberta government. So far, 26 of the home's 62 residents tested positive for coronavirus. There have been 5 COVID-19 related deaths. As well, 11 of the home's 70 staff members have tested positive. Dr. Hinshaw says her department has had to step in, take over the day-to-day operations of that home, keep things safe.
Identification of issues at that site included problems with not enough staff, and those staff who were at the site working extremely long shifts, inadequate screening of staff who were presenting, and inadequate screening of visitors as required by my orders. There were inadequate care standards, so the care standards for residents were not being met, and personal protective equipment was not being used properly. So Alberta Health Services will be taking over management of that site, instituting proper infection prevention and control measures, and making sure that all of the Chief Medical Officer of Health orders that I have put in place will be followed, including screening of staff and visitors, using appropriate personal protective equipment, and getting sufficient staff at the site to properly care for residents.
I'm glad to see that the government has stepped in and are really making an attempt to clean that up. I had a chance to speak with a registered nurse on the weekend. His name is Jomel Rhoda. And I asked him, you know, when he was in training, would he have ever thought he'd be in a situation like this? I mean, yeah, sure, you might deal with an outbreak or something, but dealing with a pandemic?
Not at all, Tom. Actually, never in my wildest dream that pandemic will be coming because of all the technologies that we have now in this time. But during my training, way back like 10 years, 20 years ago, in the Philippines, we had this earthquake. So yeah, so that's actually it's a big one. way back then, and we are actually asked to volunteer to look after those people who are affected by that big earthquake in the Philippines.
So, like he was telling me, he had some experience dealing with a large-scale calamity, but a world-scale one. This is blowing everybody's minds. How has this experience changed his view of his profession?
My profession is really important nowadays because of now that we're the first one who's dealing with the pandemic ongoing. Yeah.
How about the patients he sees? How are they reacting to all of this?
They are scared. Like even the slightest like symptoms that they are experiencing, they have to ask. They think that they already have the COVID, or they think they're already sick. But sometimes it's more of psychological as well because of what they're seeing now in the social media and in the news. So the social media is actually really influenced what they are asking, what they are feeling.
I asked Joe Mel about the stress that he feels. How has it affected his life?
It's hard to take away the stress when I get home. But then, you know what? I'm very. I always pray before I leave the house. I pray. If I'm before the pandemic, if I'm praying 3 times a day, or now I doubled it. So when I come back from shift, I give more time. Like for example, I call my wife if I'm leaving the hospital to prepare all my home clothing. I have my own small changing station in my garage where I put all my my scrubs, and then that goes directly to the washing machine when I get home. I showered right away.
Now, we've heard how some people are discriminated against. They work on the front lines, and they're discriminated against because there's a lot of small-minded people out there fearing that they're the ones spreading the disease. We've heard stories of Uber drivers, of cab drivers refusing to give healthcare workers rides. They won't give them rides to work. But Jomel says he hasn't felt any of that here in Edmonton.
Fortunately, I haven't had any negative experience yet, but more of the positive side. There one instance that I'm buying thing in a shop, and obviously I'm wearing my scrubs, and then this particular staff in the shop where I'm buying is very thankful for what we, the frontliners, are doing. So it's positive rather than negative.
Jomel Rhoda, one of our frontline heroes. Before we leave, I wanted to give him a chance to send this video postcard to our viewers here in the Philippines.
Okay, I am Jomel Rhoda, and I'm registered nurse here in Edmonton, Canada. I just want to say, want to give my hellos to my relatives in the Philippines and America. Yeah, be positive.
And I have one more video postcard. This one's kind of cute. It's from Dane Galvez and Larry Cow. They're from Vancouver, and here is their greeting.
Hi everyone, it's me, Dane, and Larry, and we are from Vancouver, Canada. To all frontliners all over the world, thank you so much. Stay safe, everyone.
And I want to add my thank you, too, to all the frontliners. And for all of you, I wish you good health. Take care of others and take care of yourselves. Stay home, stay safe, and stay tuned to Eagle News for accurate and balanced coverage of the COVID-19 pandemic. In Edmonton, Canada, Thomas High Likeness, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
This program is presented by
SMC Infrastructure, building a better world.